again, it's just talking money, more money, more money.
So I do have to,
Yeah.
I let you go more than 3 minutes, but I do have to.
Oh, I didn't know I had a 3-minute on this.
So I think those are all great points. I know you've brought them up before. I was going to bring this up when we got to the website part. I know we looked at temporary building, moving crews off site, what that would mean logistically. Maybe that becomes like an FAQ that goes on the website of how we factored that in. I mean, I think we can all agree if the building could be demolished, the construction would be quicker, but there's other considerations there that have to be taken into account that have cost implications. So I think if we can lay that out as a frequently asked question, and then we can go from there.
Can I just ask one more question? I didn't use all my 3 last night, I don't believe. All of these little dormers that we have on the building, I was speaking to somebody today who is up to date on all the new codes. Do we have a dry or a wet sprinkler system in that building? Do you know offhand?
Yeah, it's a combination.
Combination, because every one of these small units, small dormer areas, have to be sprinkled, and an access panel to them, which is quite a bit more expense. That's all then.
Okay.
Well,
Just one thing, if I could add, I don't recall exactly which meeting it was, but we made a presentation to the select board about the status of the old town hall site and what could or could not be possibly done with it. And what I learned through that process was that there is a stream that is near one side of the property and does really limit what you can do in terms of putting things there. I would suggest you have a chat with either Bob Bullock or Rich McCarthy, who understand that a little better than I do.
I just went down and looked at the stream.
Right, but they understand what could be built there, of any kind of building, and that it really does restrict what you could do with the site. I'm not the person to know exactly whether your idea would work or not, but I got the impression that that really does limit the town's ability to redevelop it.
Yeah, I think if we can lay out on, as a question on the website that says, we looked at it, this is roughly what it would cost to build a temporary building and move all the logistics there. And it just, the cost benefit analysis just isn't there. That
Sure.
We're better off putting the building where it is and leaving the fire department in their building as they are. So.
Yeah, I believe there was discussion during feasibility. A lot of these things were discussed and covered, and we talked to, or I talked to the chief at Walpole, for example, to cover what was the expense, and they just moved basically across the street into an open lot with a temporary facility, and it cost them well over $1 million. So during, in learning about that and learning what the phasing was and what the cost implications were, I think the thing that gets lost in translation is that there's a lot of infrastructure that has to go with a fire station in terms of communications, in terms of, data, all of those kind of things that it's not just as simple as putting up a building and then occupying it. We have to find a way to get all of those critical pieces of communication, information, and data to those sites. So even when there was discussion prior to my arrival of relocating to, say, the DPW, that was going to cost over $1 million. So it was like, oh, no, that we don't want to add that kind of cost to the project. So that's one of the things that in feasibility was looked at. Just like, the addition renovation versus new was, really studied hard and looked at to see, what is going to be the best cost benefit when it comes to the town, and where are we going to get the most bang for our buck, if you will, or where we're going to get best return on investment. And that's one of the things that's repeatedly come up, is that that's money that is, in essence, we're not going to recoup it in any way necessarily, or it's going to be more expensive than what the thought is of, if we could just put up a temporary tent and say, build a building and, put some people in it and that be fine, and you didn't have to worry about the infrastructure pieces and the other things that, go with having a functioning fire station, maybe that would be feasible, but I think what happens is those costs begin to become astronomical and take away from our ability on the actual project.
Well, it can be done because the bid went out to build this building, and 2 days after the bids went out, and 4 days before the general contractor was supposed to start, the fire and police department notified us that coming from that corner to the tower was the complete communication system of this entire town. The building committee gave me carte blanche with cooperation from the town DPW. I hired an electrician 24 hours later without interrupting any communications in the entire town and the 9/11 system. We had it up and running. So I know it's a lot more tedious now, but supposedly we weren't supposed to have that with the new system over at the police station. We're supposed to be able to do all of this stuff. So that's coming back to bite us again, too. Okay, then. Thank you for more than
Certainly.
three.
Kevin, if I might, Chair, just one clarification on the phasing too, because I think I've heard a couple folks now maybe not fully understanding what the plan here is, right? So there's a couple of parts that have been mentioned tonight. There's the temporary trailer, which is to replace the existing temporary trailer through the course of construction, which is essentially the residential portion of the fire station through construction, right? That's the temporary trailer that we're talking about. In terms of the phasing of the project, there's the existing building, which is going to stay operational through construction. The plan is to build the new building. The proposal is to build a new building behind the existing building and then demo the existing building, right? And that phasing and that process allows us not to go through the expense of a temporary building. Just wanted to be clear on that.
Yes, but as I stated the other night, working around facilities already in place will be more expensive than not having a building in place that the GC has to protect and also has to protect personnel coming on board, ensure them their safety.
Perhaps just to be clear on that though too, is there's no renovation going on of the existing building. It simply is in place in front of the proposed new building.
Been there, done that. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay. Back to our first discussion item. Ron, I'll just go through the order that I have here. Discussion on project reduction comments and value engineering. So I think this was one of my items I just want to understand. I know the estimate adjusted between feasibility and at a high level, the construction cost went up a little bit, but the soft cost came down a little bit. Bottom line is the same, but maybe you can kind of give a little background on that.
So for the purposes of getting things estimated, what we did was we took some of the furniture and equipment, which was actually touched on last night, and put that into the estimator's hands so that they could estimate that. And what that did is it had the construction portion of it go up, right, because we're adding that stuff in there, and then the soft costs went down. So now that we see, what we're considering a conservative estimate for some of those items, the thinking is that we would pull those back out now that we've gotten some quotes on those, and for the next round of estimating, just take a look at what the construction would be without some of those equipment pieces. So just to give you an example, aside from some of the furniture items, there are equipment items such as appliances, and such as the gear equipment, the compressors, all of that stuff. If we're able to go out and procure that from the ownership side. So we know that Matt and the chief were talking about using state bid lists for some of that equipment. So that stuff, for those unfamiliar with the state bid list, the state goes out and gets bids on these items, competitive bids on these items, and then offers it to public entities at that price. When you're buying in bulk, you can sometimes beat those prices. What that means is that people on that bid list, when they bid them, they're taking into consideration you're not buying one chair. You're buying 100 chairs. So there's savings in volume that they offer. So you do send this out to a couple different vendors, even though you're buying it off the state bid list. So, going that route, quite frankly, may save some money. And the other thing it does is it allows you to purchase exactly what you want to purchase. You're not into the situation where it's what we specified or equal. So that's one strategy. The other strategy we were talking about, and this all comes down to the bottom line, right? So we had a discussion at the working group meeting. Basically, from 30,000 feet away, how would you reduce the project cost, total project cost, without making the building smaller, taking things away that we know the fire department needs? And the chief actually in today's working group meeting went through a lot of information on that we'll get to later. But so one option is we're going to town meeting. The plan is to go to town meeting with a bid in one hand for the entire project, right? So the hope, again, and this is the hope, knock on wood, that when we get there and we have bids in hands, they're going to be at or below the estimated costs, right? So one thought is to have a second bid in hand, and the second bid in hand is to do the temporary trailer. And so on that day, if the vote passes for the fire station, then the chief would talk to his department about, spending another 18 months in that trailer.
The current
trailer. Now, if the vote doesn't pass, you also have this in hand that doesn't need a vote because you have the monies already encumbered under that $3.3 million. You start construction the next day on the temporary trailer. So what that does is it takes $400,000 right off the top. Obviously, it's something that the chief and the staff need to really consider. That's just one approach to this. We know, I personally have never seen conditions like this before. I know that our team has commented on this, and Steve's group has also commented on this, that they obviously, it's not a good situation that they're in right now, but it is $400,000, and the idea that if the vote were to pass, they'd be getting a new station is just something to consider. The next thing is we do have some items that are continue to be estimated in this project until we get through planning and zoning. We haven't even gone in front of the design review board yet. So, as we continue down this process, we're still working with them. We are scheduling a site walk right now for early April, where the building inspector and the town planner can come out and kind of walk the site with us and talk about some of the things that are required by the bylaws. And that's another opportunity to take a look at that. And those things obviously, again, don't have any effect, if you will, on the station itself. A little bit of good news. We're trying to target a net zero ready building, and we've met with Eversource. And this is a 24/7 facility. So the target they gave us, they realized, that maybe that's a little too aggressive. When we shared with them all of the energy efficiencies, and remember, this is kind of one of those things where, do you pay up front for something, which is energy efficiency, or do you continue to pay for the next several decades a higher utility cost? They've accepted the project into their Pathway 1 program, even though we haven't quite met the EUI of 35. We're at 40. They've recognized all of the work that we've done, and quite frankly, they've agreed that the only way to drive down the EUI further is to put a geothermal system in, which we have estimated right now at $600,000 or $700,000. So we didn't want to increase the price of the project by doing that. They fully understand. So again, knock on wood, is that when the project is done, you do get that incentive money from Mass Saves. Yep.
One quick question back to the zoning, B1 zoning changes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys remind me, do we have kind of a general order of magnitude of what we think needing to do the pitch roofs and what goes in those adds
Mm-hmm.
to the project? Because it's not needed, like you said, it's not needed for a fire station, but it's required because that's what the town voted for.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't remember roughly, I'm not trying to pin you down, just,
Yeah, I mean, it's significant, right? And I think Ernie brought that up. Oh, he left. All right. I think Ernie brought that up last night. So I think right now the estimate is a few $100,000 for the plantings. It's obviously a few more $100,000 for the pitched roofs.
okay.
But the interesting thing there is it's not just that, right? So you're in a green community, the stretch code that was adopted by the town.
Right.
Again, those are good things as far as if you look at it from a big picture, right? Because you're paying for these systems now, but you're saving over time. The roof will be designed. The other thing that the stretch code requires is that the roof is designed for solar, right? So at any point in time, the structure capacity of that roof is going to allow you to put solar on there. There are code changes. So again, if we're comparing this back to like prior to bylaws being passed or prior to prior projects, the code implications are pretty significant as well, right? So the new codes that came into effect with the Category 4 buildings and the 140 mile an hour projectile wind resistance is something else that, didn't have to be dealt with in prior years. So those have all come up in the last 5 years. And the stretch code is also getting another version, probably before we pull a building permit for this. And we have talked about the 10th edition building code most likely coming out before we dive into this building permit. Some of the other things that are also worth considering is even the electrical service that comes to the building, right? So there's a pole right now, right next to the trailer, the temporary trailer that cannot stay there under the new bylaws. We've been told that that needs to come down and we need to put the conduit underground. So, some of these things are all, from a town-wide perspective, and that's why we call this a community building. It's not like we're building a fire department on the moon. We're building a fire department in Norfolk. So, how does it blend into the community? How does it fit within the community? And how does it meet all of the other, requirements of the community? So it's all part of the project, if you will. But yeah, all those costs do add up, just like any costs add up. Back to the, ways that we can reduce some costs. I think the chief hit on it last night. All of those soft costs you are quote unquote in control of, right? So, we have furniture and equipment money set aside. Those numbers will go back up and the construction will come back down when we make the shift again, now that we had gotten those schematic estimates. And, you all can decide exactly what you get for tables and chairs and lecterns and, cabinets and things like that, because that'll all be part of the process. So that's what, that's where we've been looking at sort of, under the value engineering piece of it. So two things, as we continue developing the drawings, more things are going to be identified, right? Right now, the structural engineer is really getting his hands into this and taking a look at fine-tuning the structural systems. We did come up with a way to reduce some columns and footings. That helps a lot. And we're just going to continue down that path of wherever we can. I think we as a group, the whole working group, you all as a building committee, I mean, we've heard it from day one, right? We want to build something that's going to be done right. We want to do it for the lowest cost possible. So as we develop these drawings, that's what we're continuing to focus on.
And I feel like it's important to throw in here too, that, well, I shouldn't say throw in here too, but remind everyone that we're talking about a building, a life safety building, a civic community building in the center of town that's intended to serve for the next 50 plus years. So, I mean, this is a true long-term project.
And I think it's worthwhile to point out too that the cost estimator, I mean, it's a high-level cost right now. It's schematic design. We know what the layout looks like, but the details, as Ron was saying, are still being developed, will be developed in design development. So the cost estimator isn't estimating this project to win the project. He's estimating to give us a conservative budget, so that it's fully expected on bid day that we will get a price that's lower than our budget, and we'll have bid savings on that day. And we've got 2 more estimates that are going to be coming in, DD and CD 60, so we'll have other opportunities to really look at those numbers.
And now, at the DD and CD level, that's, Vertex is going to do their parallel estimate as well, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we will have
For
2
comparison,
estimates.
yeah.
We'll look at those and then have a reconciliation of those estimates. And, if one guy shows something that's high and the other is low, then we'll discuss, well, why is that? They may not understood the detail, or, the higher number may be the correct number, and we say, okay, we need to carry this. So it's a good check and balance.
One thing I did want to just understand, it looks like some costs went up, some costs went down. The one that did jump up fairly significantly was the site cost estimate, went up about $300,000. Is that just because the estimate is getting more refined and the feasibility was kind of a placeholder, or has something come about that's really driven up the site costs?
So the drainage system was reduced in size, so the money went down a little bit to start. And then when we got the geotech reports back, the blasting that took place at the end of 2017, the tailings, if you will, the cracked rock, was left in place. And so we do have to dig that out and replace that. But it's not as if there wasn't going to be any blasting to begin with, right? Because the existing transformer, if you drive by the site, there's an existing green box that's off to the west side. Well, that's the electrical transformer. That's where your primary service comes in, and that's actually sitting in ledge as well. So they obviously didn't blast. As a blasting contractor, you're not going to blast next to an operating electrical transformer, right? So there are a couple of little areas like that would have needed to be blasted anyway. So basically that whole piece of it, yes, the price went up because now we have to dig down, remove that material, and bring in some good material to put the building on. And that extends over, beyond past where the existing fire station is, So if you look at those borings. And then the other thing we found out was the tanks, and we're getting our civil engineer to review this, but Matt worked with our civil engineers to take a look at the septic tanks that are on site, and those also will need to be replaced. They're basically from the old building, from the original
1966.
building. Yeah. So some were reused, and then there were some new ones back from the 80s. And the initial reports, we're waiting for the actual report. The town has a septic inspection company.
Jay Hockman?
Yep. That they use. So they came down, pumped out the tanks, washed them down, pumped it out, and said it's not even worth going down in there to inspect the condition. That's the initial reports that we've gotten back, but we do expect a written report to come back. So the good news is they didn't have to go into the contained area, so we saved some money on that.
Now we got to replace septic tanks.
So
Not an offset.
yeah, but that's the reason why the site went up a little bit. But
So that increase includes replacement of the septic tanks? Or did that?
No, not
I
yet.
was going to say, because I thought that came about after.
right, it included replacing one of them.
One of them.
So because we knew we had to replace one of them, we said let's check out the other ones.
Yeah.
So that came up, but at the same time, we have put a list together of site conditions that we could change, and I think one of our next, in fact, it's next week, our working group meeting is going to talk about the materials, right? So we have a mix out there of asphalt right now, asphalt and concrete and pavers. One of the things that Matt had talked about was actually further reducing the little lawn area out front. So we talked about maybe extending the water treatment area, the bioswale. And if we do that, we reduce the lawns that don't need to be maintained, we make the bioswale a little larger, and possibly even remove a little bit more of the underground structure. Civil engineers are also looking at ways to come up with different options. in terms of walkways, things like that, whether they're concrete. We did in this estimate, you may have noticed that the granite curbing was changed to concrete curbing. Again, it's just a cost savings thing. Then there are a whole host of things, and I think as Erin put it, this is a building that's supposed to, last for a long time. And so what we're trying to avoid are using materials that we know are not going to stand the test of time. But there are cheaper materials to use. Concrete, or bituminous curbs, things like
It just
that.
gets dug up.
Those are the ones that you see that are all cracked and beat up all the time. The reason why is because they're inexpensive to install in the first place. But you get to reinstall them every 5 or 6 years. So, I just think that what we're asking to do is kind of turn over all those things so that we can bring them back to the working group and the building committee and say, yeah, we investigated all of these things, and if you want to choose to use them, obviously it's your choice. And if you don't, then we'll just keep going with what we're doing. So,
Any other discussion on the cost estimate?
On here.
All right, update on select board meetings. So we had one select board meeting 2 weeks ago. We were approved to move forward to design development, which normally is doing. We also had one last night where there was a discussion to begin videotaping the working group sessions. Did that start
Yep,
happening
did
today?
that today.
Okay. And what's the method to get those available?
Good question. So it was recorded in Teams,
Yeah.
and we have a whole ID department back at the office who's going to help me figure out how to get that recorded Teams video to whomever wants it.
Is it something that can be put on the website when the website's up?
If it's like Zoom, I would think that we can, because you can get a recording or put it on YouTube or whatever. I think so, but I will have to investigate.
We know it was recorded and we know it was saved, so it's somewhere in there.
Out there.
Or in the cloud, that's right. It's probably in the cloud.
And Amanda's going to start taking all of the working group minutes, working backwards, and adding those to the website as well.
Okay. Another thing that came up last night, which I think was a really good point, is thinking about how we're going to market this project. I think we've done that to an extent with the community meetings, but I think we need to kind of give a little bit more thought of how we get more exposure. I think that particularly families can be difficult to kind of get them alerted to the project. I know you had a good idea, Erin. Is it the third graders or fourth graders?
Go with Freeman.
Freeman School? Okay. They have to write an essay. And it was talked about having them tour the fire station, then write an essay on what they saw and why they think it's a good idea to replace the fire station. I don't know the best way to execute that. If it's a discussion with the Freeman School, I can talk to
I know who the
committee members.
right contact person would be.
Yeah, I can talk to the school committee members about that.
I can't take credit for that idea either. That was a community idea. So I thought a clever one. Persuasive essay. The Freeman Kids.
Persuasive essay.
Persuasive essay.
I think getting to things like Community Day that's going to happen this year would be, having, and possibly getting people to come down and see it, come down that day. Maybe we can grab the larger COA bus. Hey, we'll give you a ride. We'll come down, have a look, go back.
Or even just have a poster up at Community Day.
Yeah.
Says,
I think
Coming soon.
we'll have our open house back today, hopefully there's no spikes or new pandemics, but, things will be more back to normal for what we do with our community outreach as a department. We've had some discussions about hosting our senior dinner again, those kind of events that obviously, we can, use those because those have been well attended in the past, and we can use those events as informational sessions as well, or those events for people when they have questions or they want to see some of the conditions with their own eyes, come see that and be a part of that. We've discussed with the COA of actually bringing the department getting some coffee and donuts, for example, and allowing the seniors for one of their outings to, ride the bus over to the station, and we give them a tour and, allow them to see some of the conditions and things that, challenges that we face, just to help, again, with the project and help them to see, the issues that we're trying to overcome and why the new station is so important, moving forward.
So one thing we talked about at the working group meeting today about marketing the project is educating the community on what the fire department actually does and how it actually operates. The chief shared just a bunch of statistics here. But, the takeaway from this is we all know that there's 365 days in a year, right? And there's 754 regular recalls that took place in 2021. So what a recall means is that you're calling, if you assume that there's 4 people on staff, and the chief can walk through this a little bit, but, having 754 of those with 1,941 EMS recalls in 2021, and then the full recalls that took place in 2021. Every one of those recalls, these people who come to the station are not the ones who are supposed to be there full-time for that day. Those are ones being called in for whatever kind of call that they get. The minimum amount of hours that they're there is 3 to 4 hours. They actually stay there for a minimum of 3 hours, and usually it's longer. What that means is for a regular recall, you're going to have 7 people in the station plus your admin staff. For a company recall, there are 9, and for a full recall, there are 14. So the reality is, when we took a look at all those numbers, and knowing that this happens for 3,444.52, we've got all the statistics. He's running a department, so he knows exactly who's there and when they're there. The 72% of all of that takes place between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. So when they're there, they're either having breakfast, lunch, or supper. And the fact of the matter is, if you turn that into, like most businesses, if you will, would turn that into a full-time equivalent, right? So the FTEs that take place right now, full-time in the station, the full-time equivalents is 7 people. And we think that we've heard a lot, right, about the fact that there's only 4 people there. What's the story? But the reality is there's 7 people. The chief was considering, because there's a need for a 5th full-time member on staff. So when that happens, before the station's built, there'll be 8, FTE of 8, and that does not include when the full recalls happen at 14. So, just taking a look at that, it really changes the conversation as to why in the world is the building bigger than what they live in now. And quite frankly, the other thing that, we wish to point out when we send this off, and I think part of this education might be not a project-specific mailer or a project-specific outreach to the community, asking for anything, but basically just saying, hey, did you know? Do you know that this is what's taking place over there? 1/3 of the year, right? So we all live every year. Well, if you're a fireman, 1/3 of your entire year is spent in that station. And the interesting thing about that is they're living there, right? So it's as if, you go to work 8 hours a day or 12 hours a day or however many hours we all work. But we don't live at the place where we work. And these folks are actually living there. They're 24 hours on, 24 hours off on average. That doesn't include the recalls when they're brought back in. And so it was just kind of one of those things where we all thought as a working group, we need to get that message out to the community so that they really realize that this isn't a big building built for 4, that this is a building that's built for 17 people living in this fire station year-round. And it makes a big difference when you're actually looking at it through that. And, we hadn't put this together in this kind of narrative before because we're into the minutia, right? We're just trying to figure out how much space you need and don't need. The other thing we want to share with everybody is before we even started this process, we went and visited a bunch of stations, right? So what you won't see in our station is locker rooms, where every other station has locker rooms. And the reason for that is because the decision was to take the locker room areas and build that into the bunk rooms. So basically, instead of having bunk rooms and locker rooms, we just have bunk rooms. And so, those kinds of thoughts that went into this, there's a whole list, and we've actually shared it. It's on that board that we've been bringing around. But we think it's time to actually highlight that. Like every other station that you'll see around here in Franklin and in Medfield and all, they have these spaces, a watch room, things like that this station will not have. And the reason is because the chief and his staff believe that they can operate this building without it, right? So they were willing to, not willing, they were excited to get rid of those spaces and say, all right, let's make the building tighter and tighter. And I think as Steve has brought up a couple times, we started this project, we were in a 31,000 square foot plus or minus range, and we're down to just over 26,000. And that includes all of these code changes that we've talked about, right? That require these now whole different types of containment or contamination separations and such. So we're going to put that together, kind of like an informational piece that talks about how the station's used, how many hours, how many people, and then highlight all the different spaces that will not be in this station that you would find in other fire stations around.
We should figure out how to get both of those questions posted to the FAQ portion on the website too. Maybe
Yeah,
with a link to the whatever documents we're putting together.
We also talked about the use of the training room and the fact that the chief can probably easily come up with a regular schedule of the training that has, there's training that happens, on a regular basis there. There's training that happens for like your paramedic license where they bring in people to do that, and other towns come in. And I think we can show people that it's not just a nice room that we get to look at. It's a room that's going to get used X percentage of the year, be probably more daytime than anything else, but could be, available to the community in the evening. Help people understand that we're not building just because we think it would be nice. It's actually going to have a role in the future.
Yeah, there's definitely a functional use. Tomorrow is going to be a great example for us. We try to do as many live burns as we can, or that we're permitted to do by DEP, because it gives us the most realistic, training and evolutions. And there are briefings that we have to have per NFPA. And when we bring in other towns and even just our own department, we typically are doing the briefings not in a setting that a briefing typically is done. We're not usually able to sit and actually go through a handout with, a PowerPoint or anything, because we don't have space that can accommodate that. So when we do these, it's like, okay, pull the trucks out and we're going to stand in the bay and, do handouts and kind of go through the assignments and the safety plan and those kind of things in that fashion, which, as a chief, it makes me a little bit stressed out and anxious, because the level of being able to sit in front of the entire group and be able to address the group in a uniform fashion just doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. We can't do it right now. And it's one of the ways that we kind of adapt and overcome. But, obviously, the training room would be something that would be used quite regularly. We do host EMS rounds. For those of you who don't know, the EMS rounds is our paramedics have to do 60 hours of continuing education. EMTs have to do 24, and the advanced EMTs have to do 48. So all of our personnel any new personnel are required to be paramedics. But we have a couple that have been here, a number of years that are EMTs. But we host those rounds usually about 10 to 12 a year. So that alone is once a month. That's going to have to be, right now we're hosting those rounds, or actually in years past we couldn't. We hosted rounds more than we ever have recently because we had the old police chief's office that we converted. And one of the things we realized pretty quickly is that even that is nowhere near enough space when we have even, just 10 or 12 of our paramedics come in for continuing education. That room gets quickly overwhelmed. And one of the things that we noticed as well is, that room, when we use it for officers' meetings, or we use it for even doing work group meetings, there's been a couple times work group meetings we are standing room only, or it gets really hot in there because there's a lot of bodies. And, the recognition of the lack of space, and the reliance on, or the ways we have to, when it's cold right now, we lose out on being able to do some of the training that we would like to do because it's not in the best interest to pull the apparatus out when it's 10 degrees outside and open up base space so we can do delivery of some training or class training. And, I think one of the things that we've tried to do with this building is to make every square inch of it multifaceted and multi-purpose so that we can address and do those types of things and have a classroom setting that's appropriate so that we can, enhance our capabilities and continue to do things like host EMS rounds and have our medical control doctor here, doing evolutions and doing QA, QI in person with a dedicated space that is conducive to, that learning and to that level of training.
Okay. Any other, I got off on a tangent there, but anything else from the select board meetings that anybody wants to bring up? Update on Mass Save meeting? I think you kind of already touched on that a little bit already, Ron, but.
Right, and it went well, and I think that we are modifying the energy model based on some discussions we had with them. They've asked us to look into just a few more things, which may or may not add cost to the project. But again, it's just their process, right? So they want to make sure that we're doing everything possible to get the energy use of the building down. So we will be looking into the solar hot water preheat collectors with a storage tank as opposed to the point of use heaters. So we'll take a look at that and report back to them. Other than that, I think they were, as I said, I think they're pretty happy with the process that we've gone through, and they've accepted us. They pretty much told us we're in.
Can you remind me what the square footage prices per square foot prices that they offer for Path 1?
Yeah, so it's $1.25 for doing what we're doing. So because they've accepted us in there now, again, knock on wood that the money's there when they say, it'll be there. It's $1.25 for doing what we've done. At the end of the project, so we're predicting an EUI right now of 40.5, which is the lowest they've seen. So I think that's, part of this whole thing is, it's lower than other ones that they've looked at. They're going to come out when the project's done and they're going to ask for your annual invoices or utility bills, right? So they'll take a look at your utility bills. They'll find out exactly how many kilowatts you use throughout the entire year. And if it comes down to, a certain BTU per square foot per year, and it's around the 40.5, you get another $1 a square foot. So that's the program in a nutshell. We also found out, they shared with us that site lighting is not included in their project, which means we will be submitting the site lighting for rebates, for direct rebates for using site lighting. And again, that goes hand in hand with like the planning board, right? So some people would argue, well, you're paying a little bit more money for the way the planning board wants the site lighting to be done. Right, but you're saving more money too, and now you're getting, rebates from the utility company, and you're gonna be spending less energy over time. So, having those cutoff fixtures and having the foot candles be zero so that there's no light pollution on your neighbors' properties, it's a good, sustainable, environmental thing to do, and that's why the town requires it. We're not just saying that because we think it's a good design solution. You've got utility companies paying you to do it. So we will be applying for those rebates.
Has the green engineer provided a report, or are they going to provide a report?
They will. At some point during this process, which I believe is after the next round, we will get a report from them. And the report will essentially detail all of these conversations that we've had, and all of the submittals that we've given to them, as well as the energy modeling report. So how that works is they use our model. So our energy engineers are putting together this energy model. And then at the end of the process, when the documents are 100% done and bid, we give all the modeling information to Mass Saves, and the green engineer, as their technical consultant, goes through and checks everything.
The economic analysis was in your packet from GGD, which showed us what we would save and cost for the 40.5 for the VRF system versus the geothermal, which was the 600,000 or 700,000 more. That got us to an EUI of what, 32?
2.5, I think.
Yeah, 32.5. So we're all in favor of that if you have a couple $100,000 in there.
Not really. Versus the what was the model we didn't choose?
Right, so the baseline VAF, or the baseline VAV system.
That's right.
Is a traditional, like many people know, you have a chiller for air conditioning, you have a boiler for heating, and then you have air handling units. And that, when they estimated that, that's actually more money up front than the system you've selected. And the system that you've selected, which is the VRF system, is similar to what you have down at the police station, which, according to Matt, that's exactly what he wants. It's easy to maintain, and it's simple, and it's very energy efficient.
There are, it does condense, so, right, the indoor units condense.
Mm-hmm.
You have to drain that. And is there filters?
Yeah, so the condensers, the cassettes in the ceiling, if you will, they do have condensate lines that run down. There is a filter in them. The units themselves, we're putting them on the ground out back, similar to the police station that are on the ground. Matt was interested in keeping those compressors on the ground, or condensers, I should say, because what that does is enables them to replace things and maintain things without having to get up on the roof. And the other benefit of that is the roof structure got a little lighter if we don't have units up there. And we are still trying to make sure that we don't have units up there. So the dedicated outdoor air systems, which are, again, air handlers, right now we have 2 or 3 of those in the project. And we're trying to get those either in the building or on the ground off the roof. And if we do have to put them on the roof, we're thinking about putting it on the low roof in the back. So again, from Main Street, you don't see the units up on the roof. And that upper roof is where you would end up putting solar panels if in fact you ever added them. So.
Yeah, I like VRF. I was just trying to point out there is maintenance. And I'm sure Matt knows.
Oh, yeah.
but I do like VRF.
I think, Matt, one of the things when we were in that meeting, the systems, he's able to really monitor and control and keep the maintenance costs down comparatively to where we have boilers, chillers. He has that experience with a couple of other facilities, but at the police station, it's a much easier process and much less expensive, over the course of the year, over the course of years. He's noticing that the ability to monitor and maintain the system is a lot more efficient and a lot easier, which is what he wanted, which is I think important and good. We have that. It's a more sustainable, long-term benefit to it than
You're leaving at 7 o'clock, right?
No, not necessarily. I'm just keeping an eye on whether.
Okay, because I was going to jump to a couple
Nope,
items that
I'm good.
I think we'll well, one of them's up next. Community meeting updates. So I wasn't able to attend the one at the senior center. I guess maybe someone can fill me in. It sounded like we had good attendance at least.
We had about 17 seniors there. Of course, the senior director told them to, after you're done with your lunch, just stay right here. So I think they were.
Just low-hanging fruit.
But they, the attendance was good. There was some questions that were brought up, but I think it was well received.
Yep. Any questions we hadn't heard before, or that we should be kind of implementing into the FAQ on the website?
Not really. I mean, Ernie was there. He had his, he showed his model for his potential temporary area, so he had presented that at the beginning, but it was pretty standard. What we want to do is, as we hear new things or we think of new things, the intention is to add to the FAQ on the website, so that's just not a set number of FAQs now. It will expand as we see fit.
I know some of their concerns were, some of them weren't even necessarily, they were related to the project, but they weren't direct to the project. They were about response time, location. Were we moving off-site? Would that impact our ability to get, to different areas of town? And some of them had some good questions about, as the town continues to grow and develop, and, if a train is in the middle of town, are we going to be stuck on this side of town at the roundabout? And just questions like that, because, I think for them it's, can you get to me in an emergency? Sure. Right? And, we were able to answer some of those questions. We have had to navigate some of those challenges already, and, haven't had any, significant delays or anything that we faced as a department in dealing with those challenges. We, typically there's room and we get around the roundabout or get through to where we need to, and if we need to get to the other side of the tracks and it's something, we just go up to Boardman and go do what we got to do. So, that works out. They did have, I think they were very engaging, they did have those kinds of questions. They had some questions that I think that what we have in the FAQs address, I think the big one right off the bat was just they were concerned about response time and were we moving off site. A few of them didn't like the fact that the police station was moved out of the center of town. They had to go way out to, and they didn't want something like that to take place with the fire station.
That's identifying, I'm sitting here looking at the FAQs while we're talking too. I think we should get one in here about, have you considered a temporary building or something like along those lines too, Steve?
Yeah, I think I know Ernie's brought it up a few times, so it's.
Yeah, I think we owe it to him to directly respond. Yeah, we looked at it too, so it's.
Is there a way to, that's one of the things I wanted to ask too, like I know, through the feasibility phase and, where we are now, we've kind of addressed some of his concerns and questions, and I wanted to know if there was a way we could put some of that information out there so that, it's there for him to see, because I think one of the things when you try to explain it or we're just talking, his experience tells him, well, no, this is going to be more expensive, or that there's somehow it's going to be more expensive than what is being estimated, if you will. Like there's hidden costs or costs we aren't aware of, and there's been a lot of thorough investigation and extremely conservative estimates to address just that, even with the phasing, the site work, the things like that. Like we're still in this phase of where we're trying to make sure that, through the work that's being done, we're not leaving any of those stones unturned, where all of a sudden there's going to be like, well, hey, we're going to charge you an extra 20%. Well, you can't, because if you bid the project and this is what you said you're going to do it for, that's what you got to do it for. And, one of the goals we had early on, because of the known expense of temporarily relocating off-site, was, we need to be able to find a way to continue operations on the site and still build the new facility. And that was a major point. I mean, that was such a significant point that was one of the questions in the, when we were evaluating architects and even OPMs, is like, hey, can we work around this, or give us guidance on whether or not this is feasible? So it's been investigated. I understand he's not happy because that Grindle site is very appealing to him, and I understand that. But I also understand, and I think maybe if he can see it in writing, that, hey, we've investigated that, and there's no cost benefit. The potential cost benefit that you're seeing or saying actually doesn't exist.
Yeah, I think if it's outlined on the website that says, hey, yeah, we can certainly bring it up at one of these community meetings. Hey, we looked at a temporary facility.
Yeah.
It's sure. Is it easier for the contractor to work on the site if the building's not here? Yes, but you have this cost and this cost and this cost that now has to be taken into place, and it offsets any benefit that you have there.
Right.
On the community meetings, I think we were looking towards the end of April, right, for the
We were.
meeting. I don't know if everybody's gotten back to you on their availability.
I did hear from a couple people that either the 25th or the 26th might work best, but we didn't land on a date till we had a meeting at the library, and I don't know if I haven't checked back with them to whether those dates are still available, but if we can try to nail down one or two, I can ask again.
And the 27th was not available, right? That's one of our normal meeting nights. I think it wasn't listed.
It would be our normal meeting night because, we would meet the 13th and the 27th.
No, but I think that maybe that night wasn't available at the library.
Yeah, I've got to go back and
Yeah.
look through some emails and see if I can find it.
A Wednesday would be great, just saying.
Yeah, that's why I think it wasn't available, because I probably would have picked that one.
So one of the other things that came up at the COA meeting was, they asked what kind of contract is this, because there was some concerns about price escalations that are taking place, and, I think they all obviously have lived a long time, and they've seen that prices just continue to go up, and their question was about escalation. How do we control escalation? So we did tell them it's a fixed price. It's the lowest responsible bidder, and once they're fixed into that price, they're fixed into that price. And we do have contingencies for change orders. Every project has changes that come about. We also have an owner's contingency for any changes the owner wants to make, which we don't expect to have a lot of that because we've spent all this time designing with you. But at the same time, I think that sort of eased their concern. I think the other thing they brought up was, the idea of if we do this, we shouldn't have to add on to this again. And that was, again, one of the things that were brought up. And also the quality of construction, comment was made that, 100 years ago, we used to build buildings that lasted 100 years. And that comment is correct. And I think we explained that the construction industry has pretty much come full circle, and now we're designing a lot more sustainable. I mean, that's the whole point of sustainability. So, we could get those comments into the frequently asked questions as well, right? What's the delivery method? How do we control any kind of costs and things like that? And we also explained to everybody that the meeting or the town meeting that's going to happen in January is based on an actual bid. So we'll have actual bids. It's not an estimate anymore. And we could also explain that laws have changed a little bit. So we will be pre-qualifying contractors and subcontractors. And that pre-qualification process came about in the state, years ago when they wanted to make sure they're getting just qualified contractors to provide qualified bids. So.
Along those lines, when do we need to start that pre-qualification process? Is it during design?
We want to, probably early fall. I mean, if we're going to be, we have to do it before we go out to bid.
Right.
Because it'll be pre-qualifying not only the general contractors, but all of the file sub-bidders, and we're pretty much going to have every single one of them.
Yep.
So that is a process that has to be advertised. There's a fair amount of paperwork that goes with it. We sort of carry the lion's share of it, but there is a committee that has to be, four-man committee that has to be put together, OPM architect and owner or building committee. So we've got some time, but, you know, we have all the templates for putting those out.
It's mandatory too, right? Because the contract's over 10 million.
Over 10 million, yes. You can do it under if you want, but if it's over, it's required.
The dates that were available, and I haven't checked lately, see if they still are, that week were Monday and Tuesday, the 25th and 26th, and Thursday, the 28th,
Okay.
which wasn't good for one person, the 28th, I know that.
Yeah, I could do the 25th or 26th. Maybe it makes sense to talk to them tomorrow, make sure those dates are still
Yep.
available, and then just send out a reminder to everybody to see if they
Yep,
availability.
will do.
Or see if they can get, whoever was there on the 27th canceled.
That'd be nice.
Good point.
I'll skip down because we've talked about it a little bit with the FAQ, the website status.
So, we have updated the current website, broken down into subcategories, the various reports, and then a separate category for FAQ. And we'll add another category for the working group minutes as well. The minutes for the building committee meetings are on the town clerk's website. They've been up all along. We just submitted the site map to our new vendor. They've looked it over, and we just need to confirm with them that it's set. I don't have a go-live date for the new website.
Okay.
Just, it's,
Could be soon, though. You don't
I
know.
haven't built the website in a few years, so I'm not up to date on exactly all of that. I mean, because there's so many people involved, it's just a slower moving
Sure.
ship than you might like.
It's a lot of progress has been made, I know that. You know, there's been a lot of meetings with Ton and, you know, the different department heads, and, you know, I think the last time I went in Carol's office, she was working with her staff, working on what theirs needed to, so I think everybody's, you know, they're trying to get it done so we can go live.
I mean, the basic design is done, they started to build it out, the site map is critical to build the structure within it, but there's more parts and pieces we have to work on, and I don't have a good sense of how long each of those take.
One comment on the website, when you click on the schematic design report, it comes up titled Wakefield Public Safety.
Remember that we were trying to fix?
I swear I fixed that. Yeah. So, can I send, all right, I think you just have to use the new PDF I sent.
All right, I'll double check that.
Right, so yeah, it's just, you know, architects, right, they're lazy, so we get a PowerPoint, and then we just delete everything and put new content in it. But apparently, there's a name subscribed to that when it's originating, it's the originated name, or whatever the heck it was called. So Blythe and I were kind of like, what's happening here? And so I thought because I think when I changed that and sent it, you said it was better.
Yeah, and what we didn't do is take the step to then switch out what's on the website.
Switch out, okay.
So I think I have it, I'll double check. Thank you.
But it was a good find, because I wonder how many other times we've done that. Send this thing out and it doesn't give you the title of the document anymore, it gives you the originated name.
Okay. Update on existing septic tank inspection. You already kind of
Check.
touched on it a little bit,
Yep.
so no inspection needed, unfortunately.
Right.
So I assume that cost will now get built into the DD.
Yeah, Matt was, in fact, somebody said they were out there doing some work, so they must have found other issues when they were out there, having to do with the pump, maybe.
Actually, I did. I spoke to Matt right before this meeting, as he was leaving, and when they were doing the inspection, they discovered that it wasn't, the pump system that's in the septic system was not functioning, so they fixed that, so now it's functioning appropriately. And I believe we have to wait on a written report from
Yep.
the company.
He hasn't received it yet.
before we know definitively, I don't, you know, it's, the assumption is from what
Didn't sound
information was
promising.
getting back, it didn't sound promising, no.
Yeah, I mean, if they didn't go in and check everything out, we have to assume we're replacing it, otherwise,
I think it's going to be a pretty short report.
yeah.
Yeah. It is a almost 60-year-old system. I mean, that's kind of just.
But the good news is there's a new pump, so we can reuse that.
Yep. That's true.
One less thing.
Is there a town sewer project planned, or is that too far in the future?
It's on a drawing board, I would say. The next step for it, we got a state ARPA earmark to do go in and dig test pits on conservation land behind Freeman Kennedy to see if that was a proper location for a leaching field. And if it is, then we could continue with design to get to the point where you could show people what this full system would look like and be able to go to town meeting and say, do you want to develop a downtown sewer district and accept the law and be able to, issue betterments and go after grants and be able to
So that's
fully design and build.
5 to 10 years out or something.
It's hard to say. It's definitely not tomorrow. I mean, but we've talked to them in terms of, putting the little building on the fire station site that, treats and then sends it down under the Old Town Hall, property, under the tracks over to there. There's a concept so far.
A dream.
Maybe we can tie in before the new tanks fail.
Yeah.
25 years.
Lofty goals. Okay. Last item is temporary trailer status, which again, I kind of touched on a little bit. So I don't know what the next step is here, if you need to talk to your staff and see if they're agreeable to that approach.
Yeah, I'll follow up with staff. When we first discussed it, in one of the working group meetings, I had several personnel present, but they can't speak for the entire body of
Yeah.
the labor group. So the initial feedback was amendable, like, yes, we can, if this is for the greater good and to save money on the project overall, if there's something that, it passes and we can put that $400,000 towards the project as opposed to spending it now on a temporary facility, to endure another 18 months, everybody that was present felt like, okay, we can do that. They did want I will say this, they did want the assurance that, hey, if it doesn't pass, we need to have this. And I think that's where the idea of having the, bid in hand and having it right there and
Right.
approved to move forward, if it didn't pass, but if it does pass, then it goes away. And again, I can't say that that's definitive for the whole body. I had, I think, 4 or 5 people. I got several, more people that, the union needs to be able to get together and, vet that.
Okay. Yeah, I guess sooner you can touch base with them, because then I guess the bid of that would just run in parallel with the main bid at that point, correct?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Right. I mean, one thing, as you look at it more and more, earlier on we said, well, we'll just replace the old trailer with the new trailer. Well, that's a quick way of saying it, but you can't take the one trailer out and have the new trailer in the same day. So we started to look at, an alternate location for the trailer if we need to implement it, if the fire station is not going forward. And, looked at that, it means, some of the connections are, not ideal at that point. So I've got a little bit more research to do pretty much under the trailer, which, I'll get together with you guys at some point to really see what's under there exactly, as opposed to, being more of a high level, we're just going to put it where it is now. But I have still been in contact with some of these trailer suppliers, and I've got another set of plans that are going to be coming to me for another setup that has come back to them. So we get a little bit more information on what's out there. But, the idea right now, based on our discussion, is to have that ready to go and look at the timing. It's, it's the same type of an advertisement as we have for the main project. I just got to look at a little bit of the timing on their deliverable end, just to make sure that we're not, if we're going to town meeting in December, January, then ideally you're not going to be swapping that trailer out in February necessarily, and we can talk about that a little bit more. So it's how we write up the scope of work.
Okay. Any other?
I think I also learned is that the bigger trailer, even if it could go where that is, within a certain short amount of time, having it there, if you're going to actually build a building, was going to cause some real bigger conflicts with being able to construct the new building with the bigger trailer nearby.
Well,
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, there was issues with the grade actually comes up in that area now. You have utilities coming in there. Our generator is back in that area. So we were already looking at it previously to this new idea as to how we're actually going to fit that in.
Right.
Because it is essentially a double width of what's there now, a little bit longer. But it is congested there, and then the construction and what was planned for, I think we're coming up 3 or 4 feet in grade there, because that's where the transformer is located. So there was some challenges that we would have to look at there as far as what they could do, and almost be almost a separate phasing area in itself. So, I mean, it's still something that, sort of taking a look at, but if we're going to do the dual bids, that alleviates that issue.
And there were monies in the estimate for all of the temporary connections that go along with that, redoing all those temp connections. Because as the chief said, it's not just power, water, and septic, right? It is alert systems, the alarm systems, the lighting, things like that, and then the handicap compliance and
Low voltage.
Yep, and all the low voltage systems, telephone, computers, so all that would go away.
That's everything we had on the list for tonight. I don't know if anybody wants to discuss anything any further. So we're going to postpone approving the minutes till the next meeting?
You could approve them, I just still need to have Chris sign them later.
Okay. I didn't review them, so.
Okay.
Usually
Postpone it is.
I rely on Chris
Yeah,
for
it's
that,
just,
so why don't we postpone it?
Carol, we'll need to at the next meeting, because Carol's pretty diligent about making sure we are no more than 3 meetings away from minutes, so.
If Chris won't be here for the next one, I'll make sure.
Okay. Sold.
All right. If there's no further discussion items, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Have a second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. The meeting is adjourned.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.